Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about the Twilight Zone Season 5 Episode 28. It's called Caesar and Me. So spoilers for the episode as always. I was correct. We had a dummy episode previously. Someone reminded me in the comments. I thought I had. I was just wondering if I'd mixed up with a Tales from the Crypt. So we have a dummy episode here. Starring Perry White from the Superman movies, who has an Irish accent here. I don't know if that's his real accent. He was doing a pretty decent job if it wasn't, but Jackie Cooper's the name of the actor, specifically. And he's a down-on-his-luck ventriloquist who is trying to make it, and he's struggling to pay his rent at a boarding house. And the other major character, other than his landlord, who's this nicer, sort of upper middle-aged woman, is this woman's niece, Susan, is just this evil little child who's determined to mock him for his failures and ultimately rat him out when he starts doing something bad later in the episode. I think what's so weird about this episode is that I do find it relatively entertaining at times, particularly the evil child just being, well, evil. At the very least, it was doing something that was getting a reaction out of me, and I was thinking, oh, what's the point of this kid? What is the episode trying to say here? And I think that's maybe where the episode falls flat, is that I don't really know what the episode's trying to say, if it's trying to say anything at all. I think the most common thing that I come into when we do an episode with a ventriloquist and a dummy, and the dummy may or may not have a life of its own, is that it's usually ambiguous, and I think the previous dummy episode was probably like this, where it's like, oh, the dummy's alive, but is it really alive, or is it just a representation of another voice in the character's head? It's just like all his like insecurities coming out through this other voice kind of thing. And, you know, I've seen variations on that in different ways. But this episode, by the end, makes it very clear the dummy is just alive. And if the dummy is just alive, it doesn't really give us much of a sense of why the dummy is also kind of evil and why he's trying to ruin the life of people around him and spread more evil. In fact, the end of this episode, once we're done with the main character, which obviously I'm going to talk about, is that he basically co-ops the niece, the little girl Susan. He's like, hey, Susan. He starts talking to her directly at the end of the episode and says, hey, why don't you come with me? I'll show you the big city. And then says, oh, we have to get past your aunt, though. Do you still have those poison darts? So he's basically, the end of this episode is the dummy convincing this child to murder her aunt so she can run away with a dummy. It's very chaotic evil as well. It feels like everything the dummy does is just going to get the people that are looking after him into trouble, and therefore he'll have to move on to the next, which is maybe what it likes doing, I guess. Caesar the dummy, maybe that's just what he's into. He likes to just ruin lives. By the sounds of it, whoever had him previously left him for a woman, and that sort of reference. Admittedly, though, we don't know if that's true. Maybe that's what Caesar told the main character of Jonathan. Maybe that's just a story he spun him so that he'd be sympathetic towards his plight. But the episode, if nothing else, right, there's some absurd kind of evil stuff coming from the kid, and just how much she seems to have a vendetta against this guy, how she keeps calling him a deadbeat and stuff. That's a little entertaining in a sort of surface level way. And I do think at the very least it does do a strong enough start of the episode of telling you who this main character is. You know, the episode starts in a pawn shop and he's pawning like his grandfather's or grandmother's old watch, and he's disappointed that he's only getting $5 from it, and he hopes to come back and reclaim it later. But, you know, it sells us that he's down in his luck. But when the pawn shop guy says, hey, what about that? And he points at the case with a dummy in it. He's like, oh, no, I couldn't part with this. This is not for sale. I thought, okay, that's interesting. We're going to see why this means so much to him and maybe develop something from there. I would say, though, it never really feels like it sells us why. I guess at this point he just knows the dummy's alive, so he can't sell it because it's a living thing, I guess. But they never really developed that too much further. Like that to me was the first hint, or there's some sort of attachment he has to this thing. And it doesn't really feel like it builds up to being like, oh, this is why it's important to him. I think it is just a case of, oh no, it turns out it's just alive, and that's why he won't sell it. Yeah, he thinks that he's going to become a big shot. He's going to become a big ventriloquist act. Even in the 60s, though, I suspect that people like ventriloquists weren't exactly the biggest hits. I I don't know. I always quit. Whenever you watch an episode like this of Twilight Zone or anything else that's in an older time period, even at the time, I don't know if ventriloquism was like a big act that would be a big headline show stealer. And sure enough, when we see him go for an audition, like the guys don't laugh at anything he says. It's a complete dud. It does not work. And he was counting on this to start earning money so he could start paying his rent. And he's nice landlady. He's very sweet and is very, no, it's okay. I'm sure you'll do okay. And to be fair, like his character arc right after this is that he does try and do things legitimate, where he says, you know, I'm going to go look for a job just while the show business side is, you know, on the down low. Like I'll get a regular part-time gig to cover some costs while I'm trying to make it as a ventriloquist. So he does something reasonably sensible. But when he goes to the employment agency, which is something the landlady like sends him on to, she's like, "Hey, my cousin works here. Like, go to him; he'll get you a job." He basically says he's never had a real job. All he's ever done has been the apprentice to another ventriloquist, which is interesting actually, because I think up until that point in the episode, I got the impression, based on what he said about the dummy being abandoned by someone else, I thought, oh, he only got into this when he came across the dummy. But then it sounds like here that he's always had a history with this type of stuff. So I don't know. It feels like there's some murkiness in the backstory there about how did he end up with this dummy exactly? We don't really get a whole lot of context for it, I don't think. But it's basically like, okay, there's nothing for you. We'll call you if anything comes up. But he doesn't have any skills that are applicable to anywhere. And the employee guy even says to him, "Oh, you're not even a citizen yet." Oh, well, like he's kind of, I mean, maybe this is like a kind of like maybe like a warning story for the idea of immigrants coming to make it big in America. And you know, because like I said, he's got an Irish accent the entire episode, and he's nice enough to everyone, even though this little girl's completely awful to him. But the big turn of the episode is that the dummy says, "Hey, I've got a way we can make some money," and takes him on a robbery. They go and rob the local delicatessen, and that lets him pay his rent. And even now, the little niece is like, "Count it again, Auntie. I don't trust them. Check it's real." Like, she's so out for this guy, right? Which is maybe why it's a match made in heaven, or, well, a match made in hell at the end of the episode when the dummy takes her in as his new apprentice. The cliffhanger for the ad break is the little girl eavesdropping on the other side of the door whilst Jonathan and the dummy Caesar are having a conversation. She's convinced at this point that the dummy's alive and can talk, but of course, I think anyone else would just be like, "Oh, he talks to himself with his dummy voice." That's what most people would probably think, but maybe it's just because she's a kid, she immediately jumps to the dummy's alive. Now, she's right. I can't fault her. She is right, but she does jump to that conclusion. So the second half of the episode is basically the dummy trying to encourage him to do a bigger crime, and they go and try and rob the place that he auditioned at, this night club or country club or whatever it is. And he actually gets caught by the night watchman and kind of like bluffs his way out of it by saying, "Oh yeah, I was auditioning here the other day, I was meant to meet the manager," and he kind of like talks his way out of it. But the next day they notice that money was taken, and like now the police are looking for someone, and the night watchman saw him there. And on top of that, the niece character phones the police with an anonymous tip saying, "I know who robbed the country club. It's this guy living at this address." So, I mean, that basically brings us up to the ending where the police come by and ask him some questions. And effectively, the dummy just leaves him out to dry because he tries to like talk to the dummy in front of them and say, "Hey, tell them that, you know, I'm not dangerous. Tell them that I never used the gun." Basically admitting in a way that he was behind the crimes. And the dummy just sits there silently. So instead of the dummy representing like a part of him, right, where deep inside he's got this like other personality that's coming out to be tougher because he's too meek or something like that, or it's glossing over his weaknesses in a very sort of toxic way. Like, instead of the dummy representing anything like that, it's more like a second party that just leaves him out to dry and then moves on to another person at the end, which just makes it a supernatural dummy at that point, which isn't necessarily a bad thing for a story, but I kept looking for some more depth to the episode, and by the end, I don't really think I got anything from it. I don't feel like I got any any subtext really for a lot of this. I mean, the kid being evil just feels like for the entertainment of having an evil kid because it moves the plot forward. If it was saying anything, it really did fly past me. I don't think the episode got it across in any meaningful way. Which, you know, there's an argument to be said that you can just have a fun B episode where the plot's just entertaining. And it verges on that here or there. I don't think it always does, but there's definitely some moments that are a little bit entertaining. But it really felt like the main character was supposed to be sympathetic. I think Jackie Cooper's performance of Jonathan West here is supposed to be endearing. You're supposed to be kind of rooting for him and feel bad for him that the dummy is talking him into this stuff, that this girl is turning on him. Because I feel like we're meant to care about him and we're meant to be rooting for him and it's meant to be kind of a tragedy that this happens to him, it feels like there should be a bit more of a point to it, other than where if he was a bit more cartoony and we could just enjoy his downfall or something like that, maybe you could just sort of see it as a bit of fun pulp. But it feels like it's kind of trying to straddle the line between both of those things, and I don't think it's completely satisfying as either. Don't get me wrong, it's better than last week's episode. Look, I'll give it that. Last week's episode, The Sounds and Silences, or whatever it was called, was completely void of anything positive. At least here, like, the main actor was pretty solid. The evil kid was entertaining, not necessarily always for the right reasons, but entertaining for just existing as such an evil little shit. There was something to get from that. And at least the first scene was a decent introduction to the character. It just that the episode didn't go in a way where it felt like it kept developing the character. It just kind of presented as he's down in his luck, has to turn to crime, and the Twilight Zone element just happens to be that there's a dummy with his own personality making him do these crimes. It just feels a lot more shallow than I think the previous dummy episode, or in fact a lot of Twilight Zone episodes are. Like, it kind of feels like the main character doesn't really deserve as much comeuppance as he gets. Now, yeah, obviously he does do some crimes that the dummy talks him into, but it feels like he's talked into them and manipulated by someone else, by peer pressure, and then he's the only one who faces consequences. So it doesn't feel like a just desserts in quite the right way. Like, he should maybe realize that he's done something wrong and answer for those crimes to some extent, but the dummy should too, or the dummy should be defeated at least, and maybe, I don't know, like, it feels like nothing good comes out of the ending. So, yeah. Not a great episode, not the worst by any means either, but certainly doesn't have any of the heights of any of the best of Twilight Zone. So, very middling, I'd probably say overall. Especially since, you know, we had a great run in the middle of this season where I was getting lots of like 7s and 8s out of 10s where maybe they weren't the best episodes ever, but there was a lot of just solid, interesting episode with flaws and all. I feel like these last couple have been a little bit more on the rougher side of the spectrum. So hopefully we pick up again before we wrap up the season, and indeed the series, because we've only got 8 episodes left, I think. So let me know what you thought of this one in the comments below. You can like, subscribe, ding the bell, all that stuff helps out a bunch. And of course, you can go above and beyond by going over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, or indeed getting a membership on YouTube. I wouldn't be able to do this in the frequency that I do if it wasn't for people supporting the channels. So thank you very much. Check out the movie channel as well for all the movie podcasts. This has been my thoughts on this week's Twilight Zone. I'll see you next time for the next episode. I almost forgot to do the next time on there. Silly me. But hey, the next episode's called The Jeopardy Room. Rod Serling did come out and tell us about it at the end. Here's the description in IMDb. A defector is trapped in a hotel room and he is given 3 hours to find a hidden bomb. Well, that actually sounds quite good. That sounds like a fun little action-packed thriller. Richard Donner's back to direct. Maybe this is his redemption after Sounds and Silences. Not that I blame him for that, admittedly. And he also did one of the best episodes of the entire show in Nightmare at 20,000 Feet. So, yeah. Martin Landau's in this episode too. So, we got a big name, we got a big director, we got an entertaining sounding plot. So, home for the best. But anyway, that is me. Thank you once again for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV in the Twilight Zone.